Brian Whitehead said, will DawgNation be set up on campus anywhere prior to the game on Saturday? So we'll do our Kroger kickoff. That'll mostly be situated around the dog walk. That's in and around that Tate Student Center area in the post-game show at the UJ bookstore. So after the game, we're definitely at the bookstore up there on the second floor. I'd love to have you come by and say hello to us there. But before the game, just kind of out and about around that Tate parking lot area where the dog walk takes place. So that's kind of where we're going to be there for all of that. Don wondering if Muschamp holds on to that job for a long time. I mean, it's just sort of hard to know what Will Muschamp's career aspirations are. I mean, remember this. You're in kind of an interesting place in your life when money is no longer a factor, and I'm assuming just given how much money that Muschamp has made as a head coach at both Florida and South Carolina, my guess is, not to get into his personal business, my guess is Muschamp's probably pretty rich. And so if you've got that kind of money, then you've got the freedom to do professionally whatever you want. In other words, if you just want to hang out in Athens and be, on the Georgia staff, you can do that. You don't have to necessarily take the next big thing just because it's out there. But if your competitive fire still burns, you want to be a head coach at some level again, then obviously that's something we'll learn about Muschamp in the very near future. All that said, though, time to get rocking and rolling. Welcome to you on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, however you watch the show here today. A lot on the Daniels rumors, a lot on the reporting, what Georgia players themselves had a chance to say about this yesterday, what it all means, and what could be in store for Saturday. We'll try to cover it all next. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, by now you know kind of what's been out there. Reports, rumors yesterday involving a possible oblique injury for Georgia quarterback JT Daniels. I guess it's being called an upper body injury. In fact, let me just do this. Before I kind of get into what all is being said and before the show is done, we will get right into the muck and the mire of the rumor mill on all of this. We are not too proud to do that around here. Before we do all of that, let me just kind of read you from the story Mike Griffith wrote at DawgNation.com yesterday. So these are the facts, and then we'll get into everything after that. Mike says that Georgia quarterback JT Daniels might be dealing with an upper body injury, though he has practiced this week and didn't show any overt signs of being injured, per a source attending the team practice. Mike lets it be known that 24/7 Sports reported that Daniels is questionable for the next game, but a source close to the situation said that if there is an issue, quote, it's not very serious. So that's what's out there. I have no idea what to do with that. I really don't. And I told our video audience that we do a little thing called First and 15 before the show begins each and every day for the folks who are watching on the DawgNation.com homepage or the DawgNation app. And here is the general rule I follow. And this is not as reporter journalist, because that's not really what I am. This is as someone who has just been reading and consuming college football news for most of my life. Here is the general rule that I follow. If you think a player is healthy, there's a chance that he might actually be hurt. But if you have reason to believe a player might be hurt, then he probably is. In other words, over the course of time, there are players who were playing that we later find out were injured. But when we think a player is hurt, there aren't that many examples I can think of. Well, no, come to find out he was actually totally healthy the whole time. We just didn't know it. That's just not really the way all of this goes. So it's interesting to hear Mike's sources there downplaying the significance of this, and it may not be one of those things that keeps Daniels off the field on Saturday. But if there's any chatter whatsoever that he is dealing with what's been described as an upper body injury, then it's probably at least true to some regard. That's the assumption that I'm making. I don't have any reason, in other words, to dispute the other reporting that's out there on that. So we're left to figure out what all of this means, and that's what we're going to try to do. And if you tune out or you zone out, or if you just get busy doing something else for a moment, let me give you the last page first here. I guess in a roundabout way, I'm a little bit concerned about this. And it's not because I'm not potentially interested in seeing what a guy like Carson Beck could do as the starter on Saturday. More on him in a moment. I'm pretty curious about that. And it's not that I think that Georgia could lose to UAB no matter what, because odds are I don't think that could probably happen. But I do have my concerns about what this means for the Georgia offense if either Daniels isn't playing or if he's trying to play but not fully healthy on all of that. I just have some concerns about that, which I'll get to in a moment. But first, let me give you some other words on this. As Mike wrote in his story, Daniels, even with this supposed upper body injury that some are calling an oblique, even with all of this, he was apparently practicing yesterday, and the Georgia players who were part of that practice had complimentary things to say about him, including Georgia offensive lineman right tackle Warren McClendon. This isn't a long clip, but McClendon, for the most part, kind of downplays the significance of the injury. Let me let you hear from Warren here.
How was JT looking at practice? There had been some rumors he maybe got dinged up a little bit. How did he look at practice this afternoon?
He's been looking good. He hasn't missed a beat. He's been practicing, taking reps, and he looks good.
So McClendon says he looks good. He hasn't missed a beat. And obviously I have no reason to disbelieve what McClendon says there. But at the same time, I'm also not going to come on this show and say, folks, that settles it. Warren McClendon says he's fine. Warren McClendon says that he hasn't missed a beat during practice. That's all you need to know. I'm not going to do that because here's the one thing that we do know. And I guess Georgia's got every right to do this because there's competitive things to think about and things like that. That if JT Daniels was banged up, Georgia would be trying to keep it a secret. And when it comes to like future opponents, things like that, most Georgia fans wouldn't want the upcoming opponent, including UAB on Saturday, to have that information. But concurrent to that, simultaneous to that, there are Georgia fans who also want to know themselves. It's like they don't necessarily want Bill Clark, the diabolical defensive mind who's head coach for UAB, to be aware of JT Daniels' status, but they themselves would not mind knowing what's going on. So this is why, for all of us who are fellow travelers in stories like this, just trying to figure out what's going on, just know this, that Georgia is incentivized to try to keep it a secret even if it was true. And a player like Warren McClendon shrugging it off and saying it's no big deal, while I have a great respect for McClendon, just knowing the motivation that exists for a program like Georgia, McClendon's words alone are not necessarily enough for me to say, well, I guess that settles it. JT Daniels is probably fine. He may be, but he might not be, or at least in terms of, being, fully ready for a game like Saturday. Ladd McConkey, the Georgia wide receiver who played a lot on Saturday, also had a chance to speak with reporters yesterday. And much the same way that McClendon kind of downplayed the potential injury to JT Daniels, McConkey says, listen, whether it's JT, whether it's Carson Beck, it sounds like the Georgia wide receivers feel fine with whoever it might be. This is Ladd McConkey.
Carson and JT both prepare well. They're both great quarterbacks, so they're out there competing their tails off every day like it's a regular week. So,
is there some uncertainty with you and the receivers about who's going to be throwing you the ball with the starting offense on Saturday?
I don't think so. I mean, JT and Carson both take reps every week, every day. So, I mean, we're confident, and both of them they both have good balls, good arm strength. So, I mean, we're confident either way that goes.
So it's interesting to hear McConkey say, hey, we're confident whether it's Beck or whether it's Daniels playing on Saturday. But here's where my concern comes in. That if Daniels is dealing with this, and whether it's one of two things, the kind of injury that doesn't prevent him from playing but does limit him somewhat, or if it's the kind of injury that you give him rest now in the hopes of getting him back later on, I think either one of those two things has the potential byproduct that is, at least in my mind, somewhat unpleasant. This is a Georgia offense that's still trying to figure things out. And as much as Daniels is an experienced college football player, experienced college quarterback because he was a part of the 2018 signing class, I mean, guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields from that 2018 class, they're already in the NFL now. I mean, 2018 as a signing year, a recruiting cycle, starts to feel like kind of a long time ago now. I mean, Daniels has been around the block here a few times. But unfortunately for Daniels, a lot of that time has been not playing football. He was a starter for USC in 2018. He was injured for most of 2019. Coming over to Georgia, he was injured for most of last year as well. I mean, on Saturday, if he were to play, it would just be his sixth start in a Georgia uniform. Now, what that means is this is still a guy who's trying to work his way back from the previous injury that he had to suffer through, and he's trying to work his way into a level of comfort with the players that he's playing around him. In other words, for a Georgia offense on the heels of the game against Clemson, we would all agree needs to get better. I would say that the improvement of that offense is put on hold while Daniels is not playing. And that's no disrespect to Carson Beck, who I think could show out. But, I mean, let's be real here. This is not likely to be a Jake Fromm overtaking Jacob Eason situation like we had in 2017, because in the case of Eason back then, his credentials, I would suggest, weren't as well established as what JT Daniels, have been. I mean, Eason, just to be frank, did not play that great as a freshman in 2016. I would say that the older Daniels played better in his 4 games last year than Eason did in 2016. So it was just easier for Ephraim to overtake Eason in 2017 when that happened at the Appalachian State game. That's not likely to happen here. That the best games for Georgia offensively this season are likely to come with JT Daniels as the starting quarterback. But the development and the preparation to lead to those is put on hold a little bit, or at least it's slowed down some if Daniels is either banged up but still trying to play or injured and not able to play. Remember yesterday's show when we said that the reasonable goal in mind for when Georgia's offense could be better, October the 9th on the road at Auburn? Mike Griffith came on the show yesterday and said, be careful, BA. You can't look past October 2nd against a Arkansas team that's very experienced and I believe has a chance to beat Texas on Saturday. But one way or another, whether you're thinking October 2nd or October 9th, you're hoping the Georgia offense is better come October than it was this past Saturday against a very good Clemson defense. But how much improvement you can see between now and then, it just seems like it's slowed down some if Daniels isn't playing. Now, to be fair, and effort at kind of giving you the other side of this coin for a moment, Kirby Smart was asked, I don't know, at some point in time this summer, I'm not even really sure when it was, he was asked about, hey, how is JT Daniels developing with these wide receivers? How is he developing chemistry with those guys, knowing that they spent a lot of time during the offseason, spring and summer, also dealing with injuries? Is the kind of chemistry that I'm talking about now that Georgia needs to be better offensively by the time you get to the second month of the season? That chemistry was also an issue back then when we assumed that Daniels was fully healthy, but believed that some Georgia receivers were not. And at the time, Smart kind of downplayed the idea that you can use injuries as an excuse for all of that. So at least to give you the other side of the coin here for a moment, to attempt to be fair and balanced, this is Kirby Smart talking about quarterbacks, receivers, getting on the same page offensively when injuries could potentially be a factor. This is Kirby.
JT's had, for the most part, he's had pretty good rhythm with the guys. I mean, you can make excuses all the time, but people are injured in football. So you go play with the guys that are out there. They got to throw all summer. So all the guys were out there all summer, and we've had a few guys in and out during camp, but I don't know any team in college football that doesn't, in terms of some guys in, some guys out, based on pulls, ankles, being banged up.
So that's Smart saying you can't use injuries as an excuse. You still got to try to find a way to get that chemistry together, and I'm assuming that's a similar statement that Smart might make in light of whatever's going on with JT Daniels right now. Look, here's kind of my sort of final thought on all of this, and I guess this is kind of where I'll leave it here just for a moment. That it remains to be seen if Daniel's going to start on Saturday. We'll have more on kind of the rumor mill on this coming up in just a moment. But the fact that any of this conversation bubbles to the surface means that something must be going on. And I would say that this much chatter is not normal. Some people are going to lead you to believe, this is no different than anything else that ever goes on. This is just like the same way it is each and every week. I have my skepticism about that actually being true. This does feel like something a little bit different. And if it's different enough that Daniels is either less than 100% on Saturday or not playing at all, then the development of the Georgia offense is also a little more questionable there at that point in time too. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I don't think this alone is enough to totally derail a season. But I'm also not going to completely shrug it off either. There is a reason that Georgia fans are as plugged into the story and watching it as close as they are. The opinions and the rumors far outweigh all the facts right now, but over the course of the next couple of days, hopefully we can get some clarification on that. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether and Tharp, and glad to have you with us today, no matter how you get to us, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, at DawgNation.com. In fact, we start at 9:45 in the morning on DawgNation.com for our First and 15, and we do the same thing on the DawgNation app there as well. So for those of you watching us that platform, we really appreciate you doing that. Podcast all over the place, radio, noon, Athens Sports Radio, 960 The Ref. Just really appreciate all of you making this a fun show to do every day, making a big push to be a part of the show each and every day. We really appreciate all of that, and we thank our great partners at Meriwether and Tharp for making it all possible today. Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce, and divorce is an unpleasant topic. I won't pretend that's not the case, and if you have lived through that, it's probably in some degree unpleasant for you there as well. But here's the good news. Stories can have happy endings. And the unpleasant part of your story involving your divorce, or the anticipated unpleasantness that you may be thinking about as you know that's potentially the next step for you, understand this, that on the other side of all that can be a much more fulfilling, much more happy, much more enjoyable life. That's one of the reasons why having a strong advocate on your side as you go through that's so important. And I'm going to invite you to kind of kick the tires on this. Test drive it for yourself here by going to the website, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Examine all the free resources that are available to you, whether it's podcasts or blog posts or just informational articles that kind of give you a way to equip yourself to ask good questions when you have that free initial consultation with Meriwether and Tharp. That's what they'll do for you. They'll stand by you. They'll walk with you. They'll set you up to really enjoy the next season of your life, which I think is a very important thing. Restoring finances, relationship with children, all the things that kind of are byproducts of this. Meriwether and Tharp can do all that for you. So please find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Your source for Georgia divorce is Meriwether and Tharp. They're also just good, fun people, too. Hanging out with them for DawgNation Invasion was a great time. Bob Tharp, one of the partners there, playing cornhole with my 6-year-old daughter on Saturday. It was a fun thing to see. Just good people who do good work, and they take care of people during what can be one of the a challenging time. But certainly it's great to have good folks like Meriwether and Tharp doing all of that for you. So it's DawgNation Daily here today. Coming up in a little bit, we're going to get Terrence Edwards. Terrence's thoughts on how a pass catcher views an unknown situation when it comes to quarterbacks. We'll do Terrence Edwards on all that coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse today, and it's presented by our friends at ServPro. And let me give you, I guess, the most significant rumor that's out there in terms of, people with a name that certain people know kind of saying certain things about all of this. I thought it was interesting to see Rick Ballou, who's a radio host in Jacksonville, tweeting out in the last 24 hours that Denny Thompson, who a lot of you know Denny, that's a guy that's been quoted at DawgNation.com many times. That's the quarterback coach and trainer for Carson Beck. He also works as a radio host, I think part-time, for 1010XL, the big sports radio station down in Jacksonville. So Rick Ballou tweets out that Denny Thompson tells me that and 1010XL to look for Carson Beck to start for Georgia this weekend. This is the most substantial name being attached to a Beck rumor. Now, let me give you a little bit. Do you mind putting that back on the screen just for 1 second? Let me give you a little bit of Twitter 101 here. So this is one of those tweets that I think would have gotten more traction. Odds are you may not have seen this. When you tweet someone's handle at the beginning of your tweet, that shows up as a reply to that person and not something that shows up in the public timeline. So this tweet here did not really get a lot of retweets, things like that, because only the people that follow both Rick Ballou and Denny Thompson actually saw it. So this is one of those things that if the tweet's worded in a slightly different way, it probably gets a little bit more attention because Denny Thompson's one of the people that knows Carson Beck probably as well as anybody. As I said before, he's been quoted in DawgNation.com stories in the past as a trainer to Beck. So it's kind of interesting, the story that a tweet like this probably doesn't go as viral as it otherwise would have had it been arranged in a slightly different way. But interesting to see someone that we knows Beck well, saying that Beck's going to start for Georgia there this weekend. So I told you before, sometimes we'll get into the rumor stuff, and that is, I think, the most substantial rumor that's out there, at least in terms of a person with some credentials saying, yes, I expect Carson Beck to start on Saturday. As far as what you would get from Beck if he is the starter here, let's go back to July for a moment. Kirby Smart speaking at SEC Media Days, and this is something I've told our, I think our video audience already this morning, that you can go back to a year ago. There was some time when you weren't always hearing a ton about Carson Beck, and sometimes no news is good news, and sometimes no news is just no news. It's not necessarily a bad thing about Beck, but it was just pretty quiet on the Carson Beck front. I would have to say that I really didn't know what Georgia had in Beck. We heard about Dwan Mathis last year leading up to his first start against Arkansas. We heard about Jamie Newman, obviously, who eventually opted out. Eventually, Stetson Bennett kind of emerged out of nowhere. It's almost like we heard about every potential quarterback but Beck a year ago, and I have to admit, I spent part of last year wondering, what does Georgia really have in Beck? It seems like simultaneous to what's happening here with the potential issue where Georgia needs a new quarterback on Saturday, there's also some growing belief and confidence in what Beck can bring to the table. So much so that when Smart was asked about Carson Beck during SEC Media Days in Hoover, Alabama in July, Smart didn't really hold back on expressing his belief that Carson has a chance to be a good quarterback in this Georgia system. So if you're curious what you might see if it is indeed Beck on Saturday, let's go back to July and hear Kirby Smart talking about Carson Beck.
I'm excited about Carson Beck's future. He's a very bright young man. He's done the right things off the field in terms of classroom and doing what he's supposed to do. He's improved in that area. He's talented. He's really got good composure. He's a guy that can stand in the pocket with confidence and make throws. He's a really good baseball player in high school that I don't think people give him enough credit athletically. Very intelligent, great family, and I'm looking forward to seeing him grow.
So obviously, if you listen to that clip closely from Smart, you hear every box checked off. A guy who's Smart says doesn't get enough credit athletically, but on the other side of that, he's also studying, film room, things like that. Carson has always been a pretty popular player with Georgia fans, and the best I can tell, a lot of this is generated from the fact that, I don't pretend to be a scout. I don't pretend to be, somebody who's breaking down film for a living. I don't pretend to do that. But Beck seems to really look good on video, right? These little short bite-sized videos that get shared on Instagram or Twitter or some of those social media platforms. Beck in small doses really looks like he's got some arm talent credentials. He throws the ball really well. And so I think that's always kind of made him pretty popular among Georgia fans because these short bite-sized videos are the language that fans use back and forth with each other. They share these things back and forth, and Beck has a way of portraying himself pretty well in these kinds of moments, and it's kind of like watching a movie trailer. It obviously leads you to say, well, what would more of that actually look like? If he looks good in this short 60-second snippet, how about 60 minutes worth of that? What would that look like? And on Saturday, Georgia fans may have a chance to find out. So bottom line on that is someone who knows Beck pretty well apparently tells somebody else that Beck's going to start on Saturday. It's a little bit of the telephone game, admittedly, but that is what's out there, and we will give you that and find out. Is it Beck? Is it Daniels? Is it a combination of the two? Is all of this just one big smokescreen that doesn't add up to anything? On Saturday, we'll all be very, very curious with the home opener there for the Dogs. It's Around the Doghouse. It is presented today by our friends at ServPro. By the way, speaking of Georgia's home opener on Saturday, it's your home that matters to you. And one of the most challenging things you can go through is a situation with your home where you see damage. Remember, this is not just a financial investment, although it is one. It's also an emotional investment there as well. Your home is what makes you feel safe and secure. But every now and then, homes run into damage, and oftentimes that's caused by fire or water intrusion or something like that. And when you see that in your own home, the question becomes, what do you do about that, and how do you feel good about your home again? Well, the way that I would suggest you do that is to trust my friends at ServPro. Let their restoration specialists restore your home like it literally never happened. That fire damage, that water damage that your home may have experienced, that's what the restoration specialists at ServPro do for a living. They fix all that kind of stuff. They clean it all up. They get it back to new like it never happened. That's what you can trust ServPro to do for you. All their franchises are independently owned and operated. That means when you do business with ServPro, you're doing business with people that know what family-oriented, local service, attentive service is all about. ServPro can be trusted for all of that. So check them out online at servpro.com for more details. Now, for those of you listening, radio and podcast, let me spell this out for you. ServPro is ServPro. That's servpro.com. You can find out more about that today. All right, so there is a lot going on around Georgia football. Big win against Clemson on Saturday. Look ahead against UAB. What does a former wide receiver think about a situation with a little bit of an unknown at quarterback? How big of a deal is all of this? No better resource for this than our guy, Terrence Edwards. So let's talk to him today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And it's good to have all of you with us, too.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Terrence is a sharp guy, and he knows this program very well. He knows the game of football very well, so his opinions are always valuable for us. And so, Terrence, if you don't mind, let me start big picture on this, and we'll kind of work our ways down to something a little bit more specific on this. When you first hear about the possibility that JT Daniels has the upper body injury, you think some of calling it an oblique, how big of a deal is that in your mind, or just what's your reaction to it all the way around?
It's I think, is a small deal. I don't think it's something that's going to keep him out. It could be the reason why we didn't throw the ball as much downfield in the game, because he probably just couldn't do it. So that could have been a factor as well. But I'm to the mindset, if you're out there, you're playing, you're helping up to play, you gotta play up to the standards that you set for yourself. So I'm looking forward to him getting out there playing on Saturday and performing well.
Yeah, because if it is the oblique thing, right? I mean, I hear people say this all the time, whether it's a quarterback or a baseball pitcher, a lot of the body torque that you use to deliver a ball, pitch, quarterback throw, pass, whatever else. I mean, a lot of that comes from that. So, I mean, one way or another, if he was dealing with this on Saturday, there's reason to believe that he might have been. If he was dealing with this on Saturday, the idea that you're just going to wind up and sling it down the field, it's certainly not easy to do that if you're dealing with that kind of injury, right?
Yes, exactly. I don't think I was wondering why we didn't try to throw the ball down the field with the talented group of receivers that we had. We didn't. It just didn't look right for whatever reason. I was just wondering why, and maybe this is the reason why that we didn't. We threw to the tight end a lot, which is a good sign in my opinion, especially once we get Donnell back and you have Brock there as well. So maybe it was a good thing that we now can feature the tight ends, and we have tight ends that we can rely on, but we're going to have to get the down-the-field passing game to open up the run game and the short passing game. So we're going to have to be able to make explosive plays in the passing game down the field.
So I want to talk to you about that point in a moment specifically, because I think you're going to have some interesting insight on that. But before that, we heard from Ladd McConkey a moment ago, and Ladd's a guy I know that you know really well. And Ladd says, listen, we catch balls from Carson Beck and JT Daniels all the time. We're confident in either guy. This may be a somewhat dumb question, but how does a ball come in differently depending on which quarterback is throwing it? Now, obviously, there are quarterbacks that have stronger arms, and so obviously the ball is going to just get there a little quicker. But if we're assuming both quarterbacks have a strong arm, and I think there's reason to believe that Beck's arm is very strong too, like we know JT's is. If we're talking about arm strength being relatively indistinguishable, what is different about the way that quarterbacks deliver the football? Would a Georgia wide receiver notice the difference between Daniels and Beck?
I don't think so. If their arm strength is equally similar, it's just the velocity of the ball. You could say that one guy has better touch, could throw a catchable ball. That means when you are a shorter distance, you don't try to throw him through a wall. Some guys may put a little bit more arc on the ball, on deep balls. Some people more put it on a straight line. So there's just different velocity and different throws that the quarterback makes. And when I played, with David Green and DJ Shockley, two totally different quarterbacks, where DJ had a very live arm, and DJ, as a younger kid, would just try to throw you through a wall just to not really show you, but how strong his arm. But he just had a strong arm, and he would try to, drive it in. And with David, arm wasn't as strong as DJ's, and then he was a lefty. So we basically had to catch balls from two totally different quarterbacks. I just think with these guys, they just got to understand how the quarterback likes to throw the ball. There's one throw a more catchable ball than the other.
Yeah, you mentioned that Green, your quarterback for a lot of your college career, was left-handed. DJ Shockley was right-handed. That's got to be a little bit different, right? A little bit of different spin coming off the football there, right?
Oh, most definitely. It's definitely different spin from a right-hander and a left-hander. So you have to get used to catching from David, because the ball spins the opposite direction. And some people who listen now may think that's not a big deal, but really go and try to catch the ball from a left-handed quarterback. It's a little bit more difficult catching from a right-handed.
By the way, on the screen a moment ago, for those watching on video, nice photo of Terrence with both of his quarterbacks there side by side. David Green, good friend of our show, DJ Shockley, who's just all over the place in the media world these days, including on the sidelines for Georgia broadcast, with Terrence Edwards right there in the middle. That's a good-looking – I don't know, Terrence, you may not be able to see this, but that's a good-looking shot of you and your old quarterbacks right there. Fun memories from those days, right?
Oh, most definitely. I would put it in my T.O. voice. Those are my quarterbacks.
With a tear streaking down your cheek as you say it. That's my quarterback. I like that.
Two tears, one on each side for both of my guys.
There you go, Terrence. I like that a lot. So you mentioned the Clemson game, and listen, obviously every Georgia fan's thrilled about the win. It's a huge win. Clemson defensively is for as good as the Georgia defensive performance was, the Clemson defense is obviously stout there as well, and yet there's also those questions about what Georgia does to improve going forward now that you take probably a step down in competition in terms of the defenses you'll be facing, but also receivers getting healthier, some guys getting more experienced. Like, what do you want to see from the Georgia offense now post-Clemson as you move to, like, UAB this week and all the other stuff that kind of goes along the next few weeks? What do you want to see from the Georgia offense moving forward?
I just want to see some explosive plays. I want to see some down the field throws so we connect. I want to see some explosive runs from the backs. I just want to see an offense that hopefully we could go a little bit more tempo, get off the defense in a situation where they can't sub and they can't change and communicate as well if we're going to with a little tempo. I just want to see some execution and pace from our offense this week. I just don't want the team leaders now, because the emotional high of Clemson has gone now. So we got UAB. So I don't want to go into this game thinking, we're ranked number 2 and we have been there. We haven't done anything. So I know Coach Kirby and the crew would be preaching that, but on Saturday it's the guys, it's the leaders on the team job to get the guys ready to play, and can't go into a game like Oklahoma did with Tulane, where you just take it for granted. We got to go out and play and improve.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you think about the big environment for Georgia Clemson in Charlotte, the huge TV audience, 8 million people watching the thing on TV, it sounds like you are a little bit concerned for the potential of an emotional letdown. How real do you think a concern like that should be?
I mean, you got to think these are still young adults, and that's just normal. I don't care what anyone say. That's normal to come off an emotional high, like they just did, the build up for Clemson. Now you got UAB coming to your house this week, so the leaders on the team have to keep the guys focused. The coaches, the strength, the medal, everyone has to keep these guys focused. And let's just use the phrase that Nick Saban, we can't read our press clippings, and it's rat poison. Those guys got to really focus on, okay, let's get better at our craft each and every week. Clemson game is over. Let's put that behind us. It's time for UAB. They need to really focus on UAB and prepare like they prepared for Clemson. They need to prepare each week like it is Clemson or Alabama to achieve the goals that they want to achieve and not have a letdown.
I want to ask you more about that home opener on Saturday in a moment. Let me squeeze in one more thing before I get there on this kind of same topic here for a moment. I think some Georgia fans are left a little bit of a confusing feeling about the injury status of guys like Kyrus Jackson and maybe Dominic Blaylock right now. Specifically, I would have told you that before the season began that I thought that Jackson was close to being 100% healthy and that Blaylock might be a little farther away. And now it seems like on the basis of some of the stuff that Smart has said that maybe actually Blaylock is closer to playing than Jackson is. And there just seems to be a little bit of confusion. And this is obviously just, mostly built on the fact that Georgia fans are just very curious to know when, key playmakers are coming back. But do you get much of a sense right now for the health of guys like Blaylock and Jackson and what that might, mean for Georgia and kind of maybe what they're going through? Because I think a lot of Georgia fans are left to wonder about the status, just given the fact that, obviously Georgia's a little shorthanded there in that pass-catching core at the moment.
Yes, I was a little shocked as well to hear that Don was a little bit closer to be 100% than Kyrus. But to achieve the goals that we really achieved, we missed Kyrus' leadership and toughness out there on the field against Clemson. So I just think he's really a key component to the receiving core. He's the veteran. He's the leader. So I just think having his presence out on the field is going to help whenever that is. And Dom's just super talented. His talent is just going to be able to just outshine some of the others. So we need both of those guys to be a dominant pass game. We're real thin at the wide receiver position. I read that Coach Smart said Jermaine, he only has practiced a handful of times and still not in good shape. So we are down limited at that position, but it's a long season. And, if we could go and beat Clemson with the guys that we have beat up like that, then that's very encouraging.
I don't want to keep you too long, Terrence, but I want to be respectful of your time. But you mentioned Jermaine, and I think the thing to remember for people on that is we're talking about a guy that's still pretty inexperienced as a football player, right? I mean, learned a lot last year during his freshman season, only now just getting started with his sophomore season. And while there's the occasional freshman phenom at the receiver spot who steps in and seems to light the world on fire, for the most part, receiver remains a position where experience really matters. And I think it's important for people to keep track of the fact that Jermaine Burton is still learning how to play this spot at the college level. And his overwhelming talent and the athleticism and all that kind of stuff still matters here. But this is a football player that I believe still has his best football in front of him. And you obviously know Jermaine better than I do. But what do you think about all of that? Jermaine after Saturday and kind of where he goes as a part of this Georgia offense moving forward.
I can tell you this about Jermaine. He's a competitor. And one thing that I really love from this past weekend, I got a text from Jermaine at 1:33 in the morning on Sunday. I'm asleep, so I get it in the morning. And this is text. I'm going to read it to you. He said, proud of the win tonight, but I got to be better at blocking. He used another word at blocking, blocking on the corners on those swing passes. He said, I'm pissed off, man, for real. I'm much more than just a receiver. I need to block better. So that's what he sent me at 1:30 in the morning about his blocking. It wasn't about catching footballs. It wasn't about he didn't get the many passes that he would like. He was disappointed in himself about the 2 missed blocks he had on James Cook's sweep pass. I know everybody always poke fun about Kirby. Always talk about we need receivers to block. But as a receiver, you got to block. Those could have been 2 big plays, and he was really upset about those 2 missed blocks and didn't even mention anything about catching any passes or only catching 2 passes in that game. So that's the type of maturity that he brings to the table. And the receiving part is he's talented enough that it's going to happen once he really gets into game shape and his offense really starts to click. But he's really upset about those 2 missed blocks that he had in that game.
Terrence, that's an incredible story, and I appreciate you telling that. And, getting to know Burton a little bit just through you and obviously watching him play at Georgia, I'm not surprised. That's the competitive fire that he's showing. But that late at night to be texting about his desire to be a better blocker and not about, touching the football, things like that, I think that's an incredible testament to that young man. And I tell you, I appreciate that kind of insight from you and obviously the kind of work that you've done with guys like Burton over the years. You're doing for pass catchers right now as well, and people get a chance to be a part of that if they want to. I really am glad to have guys in our state. I talked to Coach today. Georgia's one of the deepest states in the country, arguably the deepest state in the country when it comes to great football talent, and it's individual coaches in many cases who are helping players kind of get to that point where they are on the radar for these college programs. So, Terrence, remind folks about, what it is that you're doing and how they can get in touch with you. And as I said, just thank you for telling a great story about Jermaine Burton that I think really tells you about the competitive fire that burns in him to be the best football player you can possibly be.
You can find me on all social media at Terrence Edwards, Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, great stuff. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Boy, don't you love that? I mean, don't you just love that? Terrence Edwards, late at night, gets that text from his close associate, Jermaine Burton. Terrence been a mentor to Burton. Burton initially announced his college commitment on Terrence Edwards' birthday. So that's tight. That's a close relationship right there. And he says, listen, I got to be a better blocker. I've got to do a better job than that. I'll place a bet on that kind of football player any day of the week. To go out and have big games, do big things. A guy who's, very late at night, very early in the morning, thinking about the block that he could have performed better. That's the kind of guy that's going to do big things at a place like Georgia, I personally believe, and that is really good stuff. I mentioned high school football a moment ago there as well. Before we do our best bets for the weekend, let me tell you, we got a great football game coming up on Friday. Peachtree TV, CBS46.com. This is one of those that we're going to get nationwide streams on this because we're going to do Collins Hill and Rome. We're going to be up there at Barron Stadium in Rome for this game. One of the great, great atmospheres for high school football. Beautiful facility all the way around there at Rome High School. A program that that in the past, Adam Anderson's come out of there. They've had probably 50-plus, college prospects just in the last few years alone. They are loaded again. Guys in the 2023, 2024 class have already gotten Georgia offers. All kinds of SEC players on both sides of the ball. They're going to take on Collins Hill. You saw Collins Hill go to the state championship game. Travis Hunter, elite playmaker, going to Florida State. Quarterback Sam Horn, who's throwing the football to him. He's on his way to Missouri. This is an incredible array of talent on both these teams. We'll do it for you 8 p.m. tomorrow, Peachtree TV, streaming at CBS46.com in partnership with our friends at Score Atlanta. I'm on the call. Rusty Manziel's got the color analyst duties. Jeff Sintella, part of the broadcast. Kaylee Manziel going to be with us. Going to be an incredible, incredible night for high school football tomorrow. Peachtree TV, CBS46.com. Collins Hill and Rome is as good as it gets early in this football season. Boy, that is going to be a lot of fun there. So with that said, let's transition to college football on the weekend, and let's do our Bet US best bets. And obviously we'll break down these games a lot more with Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews on Friday. But let me kind of dive into some of these right now, what to know, what to look for, good stuff all the way around when it comes to that. In fact, let's show a few of these screens, these games up on the screen here. You see South Carolina, East Carolina right up there at the top. We're operating this week. These are the spreads as we use to pick for go with the flow with R.S. Andrews. But you should know that East Carolina is not really a 2-point favorite anymore against South Carolina. Let me take you through this story really quickly. So this game actually opens, I think it opened first in Nevada, with South Carolina as about a 2-point favorite. It was bet hard the other way with folks putting action on the Pirates to the point where it swung from about South Carolina -2 to South Carolina +4. At one point in time, this was a 6-point swing. Now it's actually moved back in the direction where it initially started. So you've had wild swings. You had what they call, two-way action on this game with bets coming in on both sides. The best that I can gather, the smart steam is on South Carolina here. It seems like the early big bets moved it in the direction of East Carolina, but those may have been square plays. Anytime there's a big bet going against the steam, you can typically assume that's coming from what you might think of as an edge player. I think South Carolina's the safe side here, especially at that number, although that's probably not the number you're going to get if you go to bet US right now. Tennessee hosts Pitt on Saturday. Tennessee have one of a handful of SEC teams who find themselves underdogs in non-conference play. I think that's worth paying attention to. This is a Tennessee team that desperately needs this win. If they have any hopes of avoiding a losing season, handling Pitt would be a big step towards that. However, I don't think they're up to the task against the Panthers. This is a Pitt team that finished last season covering in 3 of their final 4 games. They won easily against UMass this past Saturday, 52-7. And, it's a team that just, going to run the football, play defense as those, Pitt teams typically do. I like the Panthers there against Tennessee. Texas A&M is at Colorado. They are giving 17 points on the road, but Jimbo Fisher in his time there at College Station is also 6-0 against the spread as a road favorite. That suggests to me, even though Colorado probably better than you realized a year ago in the pandemic-shortened season, this one could be all A&M on Saturday. I look for a statement win from Jimbo to set the stage for SEC West play coming up. Texas-Arkansas is an incredibly fun game. I'll admit I don't like Texas very much. Emotionally, I'm on the side of Sam Pittman here. But also, this is an Arkansas team even predating Sam Pittman. They've covered in 5 of their last 7 home games. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, I expect, will be rocking here. Texas did look good in a win last week against Louisiana, but we also kind of saw that one coming. Obviously, Steve Sarkisian knew the importance of getting a Week 1 win. I just think Arkansas brings back a lot of experience, one of the league's best wide receivers. Yes, there's some questions about K.J. Jefferson at quarterback right now, and the way in which Sarkisian and the Texas offense is using Robinson, the running back, certainly pretty impressive. Call me, an SEC homer here because Texas isn't SEC as of yet, and certainly I like Sam Pittman, but I'm going to go on the side of the Hogs here plus the 7. Quickly here through some of these other games. I think Mississippi State is terrible. I think NC State may at least be average. That should be enough to allow the Wolfpack to cover the 3-point spread. Another SEC team as an underdog this week against non-conference foe are the Bulldogs, but I think that's the right side to be on here. Give me NC State -3 against Mississippi State. I think Missouri-Kentucky is a really fun game. The entire world is on Kentucky. But Missouri won this game 20-10 a year ago. And I mentioned Sam Horn, the 4-star quarterback, on his way there. Recruits are always the first to know. Eli Drinkwitz has made incredible inroads in recruiting as of late. And I think that matters. Yes, Kentucky's got the upgraded offense. New coordinator Will Leave as a quarterback. This is a good game. I think the winner of this game emerges as a little bit of a team to watch, possible top 25 type team out of the SEC East. My guess is it's Missouri that does so. 2 ranked top 25 games outside the SEC. Ohio State's against Oregon. Buckeyes 14.5-point favorite. They were not great. Week 1 on the road at Minnesota. C.J. Stroud, the starting quarterback, struggled. I think he plays better at home here. I think this is a statement win for the Buckeyes. I think they win easily. I think they cover the 14.5 very easily here in this spot, and they make a big statement. Finally, the game day game, the Cy-Hawk Trophy battle in Ames, Iowa, as the Cyclones host Iowa. Iowa State's still a 4-point favorite, despite the fact they struggled last week with Northern Iowa, and Iowa's dominant in a win against Indiana. Listen, I was on this in the summer. We said this at the time. I think that Iowa is the team that was going to win this game. The whole world has kind of moved in the direction of the Hawkeyes because of what happened week 1. This is not a season opener overreaction on our part. We've been on the Hawkeyes in this game now for a while. I think it'll be a fun one. I think this is a really good rivalry, actually. I think Iowa's just a better team. had a 6-game winning streak a year ago. Quietly, no one saw that because the final 2 games were canceled. It was the pandemic. Iowa's been playing pretty good football here for a little while, and I would say that Iowa State is probably a bit overrated just given the national attention they got during the offseason. Those are our BetUS best bets, and your best bet for the weekend there as well is to open that brand new account there at BetUS. First of all, they've been taking care of their players for more than 25 years. You don't last that long in the industry unless you're doing good things for your players, strong incentives, good reasons to sign up and join. And right now you can take advantage of that yourself when you use the promo code DN125. That's DN125. You're going to get a 125% sign-up bonus. Let me give this to you in simple math. That means if you were to put in $100, BetUS is going to give you an extra $125. You were literally a winner. You start with more money in your account than you put in right before you place your first bet. So that's one of the reasons why I love recommending BetUS. So go to BetUS.com. That's the website, BetUS.com. Use the promo code DN125. The DN stands for Dog Nation. DN125 and get 125% sign-up bonus. All right, let's turn our attention back to the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment, and let's turn our attention away from quite possibly the first time on the show today, away from the rumored JT Daniels injury and the potential start for Carson Beck. Let's go to just sort of big picture stuff for a moment. And we talked about this yesterday on SEC Country Live, that there is about to be a very interesting beauty contest that takes place in college football. Because after week 1, you can make a case. Now, this is not what I believe. I told you before. If I had a vote for number 1 team in the country after week 1, I would have given it to Georgia. I'm a resume-based poll voter. Now, they don't give, ne'er-do-wells like me poll votes, but if they did, I would be a resume-based voter. That's what would matter to me. The best resume-boosting win from week 1 was Georgia's win against Clemson. After week 2, you can do whatever you want to after that, but if you're going to base it on the resume established after week 1, Georgia beating Clemson, the most impressive thing to happen in college football last week, I would have given them the number 1 ranking. However, most of the people that kind of speak about college football for a living kind of operate on the assumption of, hey, Bama started the season with the belt, so therefore, they're the one that everybody looks at most closely, and Alabama easily handled Miami. And so there's this debate of, well, who's the top contender to Alabama? And some people ding Georgia for the lack of offense, and admittedly, Georgia has to play better offensively if it wants to win a national championship. But then you look at Oklahoma that struggled far more than would have ever been expected, hosting Tulane this past Saturday after the game got moved from New Orleans because of the storm. Then you had Ohio State, as I mentioned briefly a moment ago, that struggled week 1 a bit on the road at Minnesota before pulling away late. There are people, including we played Marcus Spears on the show yesterday, who've now completely eliminated Clemson as a playoff contender because of how bad their offense played against a dominant Georgia defense. These are kind of the national narratives here for the moment. So the question becomes, well, with Oklahoma and with Ohio State and with Georgia and I guess possibly Clemson, with these teams who are still there amongst this top group, who is the biggest threat to Alabama right now? And as a way of kind of furthering this conversation, let me give you a little taste of ESPN SEC Network's Paul Feinbaum on the show Get Up earlier this week, making his case for the Dogs being that team that is still the biggest threat to Alabama as the season moves forward. Take a listen to this.
I want to see what happens Saturday night because if Ohio State looks very good, then I think they move to the top. I'm still not giving up on Oklahoma. I know they look terrible against Tulane, but I still believe in that program, and I think they'll come back. But ultimately, I think it's Georgia. Georgia, to me, looks like the heavyweight that can knock off Alabama finally. Now, I've said that a few times before and been wrong.
So, listen, I think the SEC ought to be tooting its own horn right now that after just 1 week of the season, this league has the top 2 teams ranked in the polls. Alabama at 1, Georgia at 2. I told you before, for now, I'd put Georgia at 1, but whether it's 1 or 2, this is a nice little flex from the SEC. And I also play that clip because I do think it sets the stage for Georgia fans for what's coming next. You don't really think much about Oklahoma right now. Ohio State gets a big showcase game. For the Georgia fan who wants to be the second most prominent team in college football right now, what Ohio State does on Saturday against Oregon, and my prediction is it will be a big Buckeye win, a little bit of a flex for sure there in the horseshoe. That all of a sudden some of the Georgia attention after the week 1 win against Clemson, some of that's going to go away, and now it'll be Ohio State that's getting more of that attention. And there'll be more people saying, it's Ohio State that's the biggest threat to Alabama. C.J. Stroud has righted the ship as the starting quarterback. And look at all that talent with Travion Henderson and Chris Olave and all the collection of receivers there that program has. It could be Ohio State that stands to be the big PR winner after Saturday, depending on how things go against Oregon. But with the next few weeks, that's what's going to happen. We even had a bunch of people trying to make a case for UCLA after beating LSU, which I think is a little bit of a stretch. But nonetheless, that's what the next few weeks are going to be about. Establishing a pecking order of who truly stands as a threat to Alabama. But also along with that, I do think as Alabama moves into SEC play, there should still be a spotlight on the Crimson Tide about can they make it look as easy within the conference as they made it look against what very likely might be a paper tiger in Miami outside the conference there in week 1. Of course, as you get ready for the college football weekend and the pro football that gets going tonight, pizza pairs very well with that. My friends at Marco's Pizza pair better than anything else because I love the authentic old world flavor that Marco's Pizza is famous for, whether it be the crust kind of baked to a golden brown or those 3 cheeses blended together on top. Look at all the toppings if you're watching on video anyway. I love a pizza that's got, good, hearty toppings just covered all over the place, and that's exactly what Marco's Pizza gives you. No scrimping on that one way or another. That is good stuff and great savings there as well, including if you're trying to feed a bunch of folks or a family like mine that eats like it's a bunch of folks. How about a bundle right now which includes a large one-topping pizza, the Pizza Bowl, which is actually a really cool thing. It's the pizza flavor without the crust. That's a really cool thing. So you get that, the large one-topping pizza, and the cheesy bread for just $21.99 right now. That's great savings. Marcos.com. You can use the Marcos app. You can also check in at your local store because participation does vary on things like this. So you can find more about that. You can see the store closest to you for details. Marcos.com, Marcos app. Get yourself some pizza ready for some football tonight and all throughout the weekend, including watching me on high school football on Friday night. I can promise you that'll be a very fun thing to do. All right, I have some in-depth reporting we have to do for a moment. We have a little bit of a golden shoe controversy. Listen, the golden shoe has gotten over. Like the golden shoe has really arrived now that there is controversy surrounding it. So yesterday we had a very good edit that won our golden shoe. And as we said before, it was the first time in a while we had actually gone back to the Gator hater well for our golden shoe. We had a lot of Clemson-themed golden shoes and things like that. This was our first one going back to, kind of the Florida thing in kind of a while. We gave it to Brian Kephart, who had a very, nice edit. Come to find out, though, and I thought this was a joke at first, but I guess it was serious, that the actual edit was made by Mad Dog, and we have some photographic evidence here. Our buddy Mad Dog, who has been one of our more prolific winners, he gave you the Dan Mullen tattoo, but apparently that got passed around on some other platforms. Brian then shared it with us. So a little controversy yesterday, so credit to the original author here, Mad Dog, and obviously we certainly appreciate all of his great work, and Brian's and everybody else who sends us these Golden Shoe submissions because they're always fun and enjoyable for me. But controversy averted as the original auteur of the Golden Shoe from yesterday gets his full credit. So speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, how about our Gator Hater Countdown 51 days from right now? Dogs get to win over the Gators. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. R.S. Andrews, the one to turn to for all of that. They'll get your air conditioning tuned up to factory fresh specs, get your water heater replaced, electrical stuff. Goodness knows I have no idea how any of that kind of stuff works, but if you have an issue, R.S. Andrews does. Dari Payroll, the whole team, they'll get you fixed. They'll get you fixed good. And, of course, Dari Payroll is going to be with us as well for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews and the DawgNation video channels tomorrow. So that will be really fun there, too. All right, let's do some comments. And let's go Facebook first, and then I'll go YouTube, and then we'll go DawgNation.com, and we'll do all of that. And, of course, if you want more comments in your life, don't forget to join us 9:45 in the morning for our First and 15 on the DawgNation homepage and the DawgNation app on all of that. So let's find out what people are saying about JT Daniels. Chase Smith asks a really good question. He says, does Jeff Collins get fired when Tech loses to Kennesaw State this weekend? Let me tell you something. Y'all better be not y'all don't care, you're Georgia fans. Tech better be real careful with Kennesaw State. I mean, isn't the coach, like, I only halfway know any of this stuff. The coach is Brian Bohannon, right? Isn't Bohannon, isn't he a Paul Johnson disciple? Am I right about this? Yeah, so my guess is this is a Tech team that just, it can't count a W against anybody, first of all. My guess is there's a little extra steam powering the Owls ship on Saturday. I'm guessing that Bohannon, on behalf of his mentor Paul Johnson, wouldn't mind being a little bit of a fly in the ointment there for the Jeff Collins there at Georgia Tech. If I had to assume, I don't have any kind of inside information on that. Frankly, I don't care enough to seek it out. But I'm assuming that there's a little extra juice for the Owls against Georgia Tech on Saturday, and this is a Tech team that, woo boy, they are not finding football to be an easy game at this point. Be very, very careful about that. Be very careful about that. Phil Rogers says, how many punts do we have on Saturday? Boy, I hope not too many. Hope not too many. Joe Melee referencing previous big names on the show that don't get mentioned quite as much anymore. Matt Rugvina says, here's the deal with JT. He suits up and starts, and basically, and if we're 2 scores up at the half, Beck takes over. You may be right about that. But here's like the one thing that you just got to be on guard for. Like there's a lot of this that's out there in the world right now of the JT Daniels injury isn't real, but it's also the reason the offense struggled last week against Clemson. Have you noticed this? There's some of this going on in the world where it's like, oh, everybody makes a big deal of this JT Daniels injury. It isn't anything. And then they go on the same sentence to be like, well, that's also the reason why the Georgia offense wasn't throwing the ball downfield last week against Clemson. Like both those things can't be true. Either there's nothing to the Daniels injury whatsoever, and whatever happened against the offense for the offense last week was kind of its own thing. Or if a quarterback was limited to the point where you couldn't throw the ball downfield against Clemson, then the Daniels injury is clearly something. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor or anything like that, but I'm also tired. I'm talking about tired. Like my soul is tired. My bones are tired. My whole body is tired of trying to parse these words from these players and supposed sources and everything else about nothing's a big deal. Oh, but now it's 5 weeks, right? I'm just sick of that. Like I'm just so tired of that, and I don't blame anybody for it. Whatever else, but this thing where like, there's been a lot of initial reporting is nothing to see here. Follow-up report, updated : expected to miss 5 weeks. There's just been a lot of that, and at just a certain point in time, that's just the deal. Joel Moody says Beck will throw vertical, be somewhat successful, at least 140 yards plus explosive plays. Listen, there's a lot of reason to be excited about what Beck might bring to the table. Joe Maley also talking about Brock Vandagriff. I mean, Vandagriff's a guy that I'm really excited about seeing too. And Vandagriff's going to be one of these guys, and you may have seen the same thing with Beck a year ago, and you may eventually see the same thing with Vandagriff too, where it's like eventually there's some exponential growth that takes place. There's some really accelerated growth. It's like college is hard when you first get on campus. You're learning. You're trying to absorb everything you can. And maybe that learning curve feels pretty steep to begin with. I don't know that's been the case for Brock Vandagriff. I'm just assuming that for some guys it might be true in a situation like that. But at a certain point in time, you kind of crest over the initial steepness of the learning curve, and this thing kind of gets a little easier for you there at that point. And then all of a sudden you're growing, much faster, much quicker. For sure. Let's see what else. Lavelle Hughes looking forward to James Cook on Saturday. Chase Smith says Dogs win 41-6 on Saturday. Jerry Swafford, like if I could have taken the last hour of my show, I could have summed it up in one sentence. Jerry says, I don't doubt anything and I don't believe anything. Like that, like basically the entire last hour of what I've said could be summed up by that one sentence. I don't doubt anything. I don't believe anything. Like I don't care who your source is. I don't care about the source. I don't care if it comes straight from the horse's mouth, whatever horse you're talking about here. I don't doubt you, but I also don't believe you. There's just so much. Jerry, you're 1,000,000% right. 1,000,000% right on all of that. I totally agree. And I don't fault anybody, right? I mean, it's like people have reasons for saying what they say. And, I'm not necessarily mad at you for it. And I don't mind sifting through rumors. That's part of what we do around here. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you how I interpret news, and I'm just skeptical of it all. And like the last thing I'm going to do is say, there's nothing to see here, nothing to worry about, knowing that there have been a few nothing to see here, nothing to worry about type stories as of late that have turned out to be a little bit more substantial than they were initially suggested. Brian Whitehead, happy to hear about Jermaine Burton and his text to Terrence Edwards. Yeah, I thought that was actually one of the more interesting things from today's show. Strong inside information there and good stuff. Emma Franklin looking forward to Carson Beck on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, even if let's say that JT is healthy and he starts and he plays well. I mean, obviously, I still like the idea of a backup quarterback playing on Saturday. There just haven't been a lot of moments in the last couple of years for Georgia where they've had a chance to play a backup quarterback in a traditional backup quarterback role. In 2019, and I hate to say this, they just weren't beating teams bad enough. You got to beat teams pretty bad to get your backup quarterback into the game. Georgia wasn't capable of doing that. And in 2020, just kind of a weird year all the way around. So I'd like to have backup quarterback in the game. Big Blue 95 says play Beck the next 2 weeks. He gains experience. Daniels has an injury that will nag him all year. Here's the problem with that though, Big Blue, that what you describe may be what happens. No matter what everybody says about nothing to see here. Daniels might not play on Saturday, and some of the same people who are saying nothing to see here are then going to come out and tell you, it's no big deal that your quarterback is not starting one of the only 12 games that you played in the regular season. There's a way in which certain people always make everything sound like it's no big deal, but when you've only got 12 regular season games, your starting quarterback does not play in one of those games, it is a little bit of a big deal. And if, as you suggest, he doesn't play the next 2 weeks, for a quarterback that's only played 5 times in a Georgia uniform already, then some of the development you want for your offense is put on hold while he's not playing. That doesn't mean the rest of the season is going to be a disaster, but it does mean that if you are not starting the quarterback that you think of as your starter, there is a price to be paid for that. There is no free lunch. That, UAB is supposed to be a tune-up game. But if you treat it tuning up Carson Beck, that may help you in 2022, and very likely would help you in 2022, but it would put you behind schedule, I would say, in 2021. Not to overcomable, not to some degree that couldn't be overcome, but there is a little bit of a price to be paid if you're not starting JT Daniels. This is not a guy who started for 3 years at Georgia. This isn't Trevor Lawrence missing 2 games with COVID last year for Clemson. This is a guy who's only started 5 times in a Georgia uniform and essentially went 2 years without playing football before that. JT Daniels needs to play football. Not because he's not a good player, but because good players want to get better. Daniels needs to play football. It's probably the number one reason why he came back to Georgia this year, because he knew he needed more seasoning. He needed to prove to NFL scouts he was fully healthy. This is not part of the master plan. There's always this thing of like whatever happens was exactly what was expected and exactly what was planned for. JT Daniels did not come back to Georgia this year to not play for the UAB game. Now we'll see how that actually ends up playing out. Michael Lumpkin says at the time of the game, I felt like the coaches were limiting JT Daniels' long throws, but it now makes sense with the injury. And, maybe that's the case, but it also goes back to something we said, I think, yesterday's show, that if you think of like your starter as like your A player, and no disrespect to the backup, but if you think about that guy as your B player, I am generally of the assumption that a B player at 100% is more valuable than an A player at like 85%. So whatever degree to which JT Daniels is limited, if he is limited, then there is a chance that the 100% version of Daniels' backup, in this case Carson Beck, may be more valuable to Georgia right now than JT Daniels is. I don't know if, first of all, who even knows if this Daniels injury is even real, but if it is real, I don't know that that's what limited Georgia last week offensively against Clemson. That could be just a convenient excuse. Let's not forget that. But if that was true, you can't have a quarterback playing for you anytime in the near future who can't throw the ball deep down the field. And if that was true for Georgia, then you better believe they'd be doing everything they could to make sure future opponents don't learn that, because that changes the way they'll game plan against Georgia. But if what happened for Daniels last week against Clemson, what happened for the passing game last week against Clemson, was due to a Daniels injury, then yeah, they need to be playing Carson Beck, I'm afraid. And we'll see if that's what happens on Saturday. Let's see what else is going on YouTube. Kenny Fuqua said someone asked if Clemson would lose another game. I mean, the problem is their schedule's so weak. I mean, I played some of this for you yesterday. Like, Clemson's getting just bashed in the national media for the way they played against Georgia. One of the ESPN folks was saying they shouldn't have been ranked 6th. They should have been ranked much lower than that. I played you the audio yesterday of Marcus Spears saying that Georgia essentially ended them as a program. Some of that seems a little overstated to me, to be honest with you, but it is interesting to hear how much of it there is. Fishing with Tiny Bass and says, what about Brock Vandagriff? If Carson Beck as the next quarterback, do you think he transfers or waits his turn? So here's what I'm going to say about Beck versus Vandagriff, because I'll totally admit I'm very curious about the 2022 quarterback situation. Very curious about that. I think it's way too early to say that because Carson Beck is number 2 now, he's number 1 next year. That's no disrespect to Beck. But much the same way that Beck seemed to progress pretty quickly at a certain point, whereas he wasn't even seemingly an option to play last year, week 1 against Arkansas, but now a year later he is the obvious choice to be the starter if Daniels can't go then, that you could see a similar level of growth for Brock Vandagriff too. Beck went from being slotted behind Stetson Bennett for playing time a year ago to now being ahead of Bennett for playing time now. If that happened 2020 to 2021, then Vandagriff could do the same thing, overtaking Beck next year. In other words, next year's quarterback situation for Georgia, if it plays out the way that I think it's going to, should be treated differently than, like, say, the last couple of years quarterback situations, in my mind. Remember, I've made the case the last couple of off seasons that Georgia ought to treat its guy like the starting quarterback. Now, this year they did that. Kirby Smart's doing radio interviews in early March saying, yeah, JT Daniels is our starter. He's earned that job. We like our other quarterbacks, but JT Daniels is our starter. I said a year ago they should have done the same thing with Jamie Newman, and who knows how life could have been different had they done that. But, when you have a clear guy who is in front of the others, treating him like the starter is the thing to do. You can dispute the Newman thing, but you can't dispute that treating Daniels that way this year was the right thing to do. However, next year is not the year to do that. Next year, and Kirby Smart clearly won't, next year is not the year to name some starting quarterback in spring or something like that. It's going to be an intense, open competition, and it could very well be late August, and we still don't know who's starting for Georgia. That could also be one of those things that Georgia won't say, but everybody just truly knows. Sometimes that happens. But next year is going to be an open competition, throughout the calendar year. And if Beck is the guy who plays the most this year, and if he gets a chance to start on Saturday, then obviously that game experience gives him a huge leg up. But I don't think it makes them the overwhelming favorite to win the job next year. I think that Vandagriff is still a part of that. So I think it's a great question. And it's one of the reasons why I'd love to see them both play, because I want to make it as fair and open for both guys as possible. But at a certain point in time, Vandagriff is going to emerge. And, of course, next year you'll also have Gunnar Stockton on campus there too. But I would say that the race to start is likely between Vandagriff and Beck, if I had to say. Teresa Pope says, what Carson Beck does Saturday and does good, then will JT Daniels be trashed, or what will the narrative be? So, listen, there's a reason why quarterbacks get all these NIL deals and, get all the, the glory and, all that kind of stuff, is because they get all the attention. So, will there be some stirring up of rumors and things like that if Daniels, struggles? I'm sorry, if Beck plays well? There'll be some of that gets stirred up, but I honestly don't think that it's real, right? I mean, as I said during the regular show, for a lot of reasons, this is not Eason from 2017 for me. But I think that Daniels is more well-established, even though he hasn't played much at Georgia. For a number of reasons, I think he's more well-established than I believe that Eason would have been in 2016. Eason's numbers as a freshman were just only okay. This was not a guy that had taken that quarterback job at Georgia by the stranglehold. Now, he was a good soldier for Georgia once he got hurt. I think he's a DGD. But he was not an obviously great quarterback after 1 year starting here in 2016. You can say that that Daniels isn't either, but I would say that Daniels is more proven after 4 games in 2020 than Eason was after almost a full season 2016. We got to get ready to go here in a moment, by the way, too. So we got a ton of comments, and we're not going to be able to get them all in today. Our buddy, a commenter, says Grizzly Adams didn't wear pomade. I guess maybe that's the case. Although I still think Uncle Jesse was in that show, I think. Frank Patterson wants to know if Carson Beck can effectively run the toss sweep. You laugh about that, but our buddy Troy Sadowski, who comments on Facebook, he wants to see those toss sweep plays. The ex-All-American tight end. Brian McPhail says Carson Beck was Mr. Football in the state of Florida for his junior season. Yeah, he had a great junior season. No question about that. A couple more on Facebook, and we got to get ready to go. Chad Williams on the subject of quarterbacks. Someone is leaving. Dog fans just need to accept that it's coming. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about that. Quarterback doesn't want the starting job, eventually transfers. You have no control over that. The only thing you can control is who you bring into the program. But you really can't do anything to keep people from exiting the program. Now, you can, I would say it behooves you to be as honest and forthright and open about the entire process. I would say that's an important thing. But in terms of, guys that don't start, in many cases are just going to want to leave. And so you can't really control that. And since you can't really control that, you just got to, those are the cards you are dealt here in 2021. I think you just got to kind of deal with it a little bit. Randy Hall expecting a big day from Jordan Davis against that UAB offensive line. Maybe the case. By the way, Allison Scaley on DawgNation.com also mentioned Davis getting the big NIL deal. Yeah, that was great to see. Somebody also mentioned Elle Duncan over here. Yeah, we apologized to Elle because we said yesterday we thought she was being too negative, and come to find out she had seen the future. So there you go on that. Brian Whitehead, thank you for the kind words. Back on YouTube for our final comments of the day. Paul Moon, the subject of Branson Robinson. Yeah, boy, I think he's a good-looking running back prospect, and comparing him as a LeCount-type figure as a solid commit for that 2022 class is probably a good one. Johnny Lester, already looking forward to that Florida game, and I love that. Let's see what else. Stephen Wainwright asking about Eric Gilbert. Yeah, I really don't have anything new on that front right now. Green Soldier says we'll make this our last comment. Foster Moss, yes, we do have cover 4 tonight. We'll be doing that live 7:30 p.m. Green Soldier says rewatching the Clemson game. Zamir White had 2 runs close to breaking loose. Credit to Clemson safeties. They missed a single tackle, and White runs it at least once. I think that's a good point. Clemson defense was good, and as we've said on the show this week, the Georgia offense is likely to get a little bit better just because it's playing different defenses. Although UAB on paper is a pretty good defense too, but I think Green Soldier's point on that is a very good one. All right, we're going to wrap up for today, and we appreciate you being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll continue to follow this news and talk about it wherever it goes and whatever happens next on that. And speaking of news, make sure you get that from our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Always a great chance to check in on what's going on, including the start of the NFL season tonight. Of course, the Falcons getting ready for their opener on Sunday, and continued stress and frustration when it comes to our state and really our world battling the coronavirus and specifically this Delta strain. So news there on that. Also, Lenox Square Mall. You've seen some crazy stuff at Lenox Square the last year or two. They're kind of changing some of the rules there as a way of maybe remedying some of that kind of stuff. And also update, important one, long-term for the Braves on the future of Freddie Freeman and his potential contract in Atlanta. Good update on that. Kyle Pitts gets ready to make a debut. And, I'll say this just very quick with the Falcons. Arthur Smith, the new coach, has shown us nothing. And by us, I mean anybody who cares about the NFL. Shown us nothing during the preseason. A little bit of Pitts in the final preseason game. I mean, really almost anything Atlanta's going to do on Sunday is going to be a pretty big mystery. So worth paying attention to all the way around. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com for more on that. All right, thanks for being here. We'll come back. We'll talk tomorrow about wherever this quarterback thing is, if it's moved at all, and we'll do our part to get you ready for Georgia and UAB. Also, if we have time tomorrow, we'll definitely do some of the Channing Tindall stuff because people seem to really like that. But we'll also give you a very bizarre compliment that a well-known analyst gave to Georgia. We'll do that on tomorrow's show, too. So all of that on the way. Thanks for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.